Hey guys, welcome to the first show, Beers with Bill, in January 2021. And it's my pleasure to have Zak Gordon from Cowbell Brewing, the territory manager there. Knows kickoff quite well because he was our rep. And Zak, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Real pleasure to be here with you guys tonight. And I hope you guys were all able to find the beers okay out there wherever you are. The first one that we're going to start with tonight is Absent Landlord. This was the first beer that we ever produced at Cowbell. So way back to 2016 was when we first launched this beer. So I joined the team in April of 2016, but there had been a long time of planning leading up to this. We had a fairly small team at the time. There was about 10 of us or so. And I joined on as the initial part of the sales team. So it was myself, another gentleman named Brandon, and then Bobby as well too. And we sort of helped build out the sales, but we were only working with one beer at the time. So we took Absent Landlord, this was prior to having Cowbell, and we brought the recipe over to actually Collective Arts at the time. That's where we decided to initially do some contract brewing. So we partnered up with those guys to get our first batch out in May of 2016, and then brewed with them for a small period of time before we then moved this brand over to Brunswick Beer Works, which you guys may be familiar with, based out of Toronto. We did some brewing with them for a bit, and then once our facility was up and running in 2017, August of 2017 is when we officially opened the doors. Then we could produce this beer in-house, and it's been there ever since. Excuse me. So what you have here is 5.3%. We call it a country Kolsch. I'll get to that in just a minute. 18 IBUs, so it's just a little bit of bitterness there, just to balance out the beer, but it's very clean, very smooth, and very refreshing. The SRM on it is 5.5, so I mean, as you can see, it's fairly clear. Got a little bit of that copper, sort of golden orange color to it. We produce this in 473 ml cans. We put it in 30-liter kegs, and we also put it in 58s now as well too, because it is a very high selling beer for us. Okay, so style denomination. We do not filter any of our beers. So this is left unfiltered. It's brewed both with Old World and New World ingredients. We also ferment this beer warm. So this is not typical of your traditional Kolsch. We ferment this beer at 24 degrees Celsius, where most would be done more in the cold side of the brewery at around about 14 degrees. This is done to emphasize, the delicious flavors produced by our own in-house authentic Kolsch yeast strain. And this is why we call it a country Kolsch, because we've taken a German style beer and we've manipulated it to our own specifications out in the country in Blythe. So it's not intended to represent that traditional German style Kolsch. These came from Cologne, Germany, and were very clear, very yellow, minimal yeast driven aromatics. They didn't really have any hop aroma either, whereas you can find, you'll get a little bit of that hop sensation from this. I mean, it's by no means an IPA or even in that pale ale category, but you do find a little bit of that bitterness there. So the Germans had produced a Kolsch as sort of a retaliation or an offset to the English pale ale, which was very dominant in Britain and Europe at the time. And it's a great beer. It's just something that we wanted to introduce in our own way out into the market. Also, when we launched this beer, the prevalence of IPAs and pale ales were very strong. They were having their boon at that time. And we thought, well, if we just hit the market as a brand new brewery with an IPA right out of the gate, we're just going to be like everybody else. So let's see, what can we do that's going to stand out a little bit more and make a bit more of a splash. So that's why we landed on this recipe. And it was sort of a happy accident because our brewmaster at the time, Stephen Rich, had come up with this idea of warm fermentation on a Kolsch, which, like I said earlier, wasn't typically done. So he decided to give this a whirl on some pilot batches and was really pleasantly surprised and happy with the outcome. And so was the rest of the team. And that's why we really stood behind this as a first beer. The other nice thing about a Kolsch being our first beer is that in Germany, it's used as a welcome beer. So much like North Americans sort of treat champagne, if you will, as like a celebratory, welcome, toasting kind of beer, in Germany, a Kolsch is often used in that same format. Typically, they're being passed around in stanges, which are small, thin glasses. They're only a few ounces in volume, and they get passed around on these trays. And it's sort of, you're arriving to the party, you're arriving to the pub, you're arriving to whatever the festivities are. You pass around these little trays of Kolsch, and that's your welcome beer, your toast beer, if you will. So we thought it was very fitting as well to have that be our first inaugural beer for Cowbell, and something that we love to share with folks as they come out to our brewery now as a welcome to Cowbell. A little bit about the story behind this beer. Absent Landlord, we get asked a lot, why Absent Landlord? It's a great story. There was a gentleman by the name of Henry Blythe who lived out in Drummond, England, and he bought the town of Blythe, which was actually called Drummond at the time. I think it was 1855, if I remember correctly. And he bought the town sight unseen. So he wanted to own something, he wanted to put his namesake on it, but he passed away before ever coming. So in effect, he was the absent landlord of the town of Blythe. So we dug that one out of the history books and decided that it was a fun one to lead off with in our series of core brands. So yeah, that's a little bit about that. The ingredients, so with all of our beers, we pull fresh water from our own well that we have on site. We treat this water and use it in all that we do there. So the water is our own. We use some Pilsner malt, which is from Germany. We use a Munich malt, which is also from Germany. So a little bit of nod to the old world from our beer, from the style. We use some torrefied wheat, which comes from Canada. This is sort of like a puff wheat cereal, something that contributes a bit to that creamy, smooth mouthfeel, as well as produces a really nice foam, a nice head on the beer. Even now, I'm seeing, mine has a nice head retention as well too, which is great. So that's a little bit of what that does. We have some aromatic malts and some Cara foam as well, which also helps with head retention and some body. The hops, we use a Hersbrucker hop, which is a German old world hop. Gives it a little bit of that floral, grassy, and some kind of melon notes, I guess. We use a Pearl hop, which is also a German old world hop. Gives a bit of pine and some of that like freshly cut grass. And then the New World component to it is the Wakatu hop, which is from New Zealand. And this gives it a little bit of that honeydew, sweet, floral sort of sensation to the beer, which is really nice.
Terry's asking, is Kolsch a style that's starting to make a resurgence, or is it just a style that people latch onto once in a while?
I don't know if it's making a huge resurgence. I definitely notice them out there in the market. Now that's something that I pay attention to directly. So I noticed them coming around probably a couple of years following us launching. There were some that were more traditional. Look at Lugtread, for example. That is effectively a Kolsch, right? It's a lagered ale. So they were doing that years before we ever pumped out our Kolsch. And there were many out there at the time. I don't see people spring into the classic German Kolsches as much, but there is a little bit of prevalence from other breweries doing them. Everyone's just looking for a new style to always add to their portfolio, and it's a great beer. It's still one of our highest selling beers to this day. I don't know if that's due to just the brand recognition or if that's a drinkability thing. Yeah, there's sort of a bit of a question mark around that. But yeah, to answer the question, I would say yes, there's a bit of a resurgence, but albeit small.
Yeah. Everybody wants to know if you've got a dynamic screen or is that real behind you?
Oh no, it's real. Yeah, you can pull these guys off. Yeah. I collect beer. I love craft beer. I've been into it since I don't know, just shortly after university days. I mean, definitely I was drinking the cheap stuff in my first, second year, third year or so, but then I started to get more and more into it with actually our brewmaster, Stephen Rich. So he and I started getting into a bunch of European beers and then really dancing into more craft around Ontario. And yeah, fond love and collection. So yeah, it is real. Yep.
How many beers do you have in your cellar?
Oh, hundreds. Yeah. I don't know, lots.
Yet?
What's that?
Not quite to 1,000 yet?
No, and I don't want it. I actually would like to, I don't want to grow it too much more. I like where it is and I like the ebb and flow. I've put a lot of time into it over the last decade. And I think that's when you get to that sweet spot of having things every year that are great to pull out for that celebratory time, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, or getting together with certain friends that you know is going to love that Imperial Stout or that Quad or that whatever. Things that are ageable. That's sort of how I like to treat it now. I don't want it to get too crazy.
Keith and I'll show up after COVID to help you empty that, okay?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Well, I love visitors, love to host too. And it always gives you a good excuse to pull something out of the cellar, right? And then you can crack something and enjoy. That's part of the fun. I like it when people come down and have a look and, oh, you have one of these. Yeah, let's open it up, right? It's a great excuse to crack in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one question and then we're going to switch to the next beer.
Oh.
Keith Carmen introduced us, so I have to ask, what musical instrument do you play? And are you a member of a punk band?
I am not a member of a punk band. I do play the drums. I played since I was in grade 6. That's when I got my first kit. And I love it. I've had them up in my cottage for a long period of time, and I recently got them back in the house. But I am a family man and got a couple of little ones. And so it's during COVID, it's good and bad because it's a great outlet, but it's hard because I got to get them all out of the house basically to be able to really smash around. So Play the drums, play the piano, and used to play the trumpet as well too, back through high school, but yeah, not anymore. More just piano and drums.
Okay. What's our next beer going to be?
Next beer is Boxing Brewing. Crack that. All right. Hopefully everyone was able to find this one. So Boxing Brewing is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite in our lineup. I'm a huge fan of American IPAs, West Coast style IPAs. Don't get me wrong, I do love hazies as well too, and they have made quite their craze, especially over the last year or two. But this is, I always say, is one of my favorite after work beers. I love coming home and cracking Boxing Brewing. It's just very refreshing, perfect amount of hops, very tops in my books. So this one here, we're looking at 6.3%, medium strong ABV, really just appropriate for a proper IPA. It's 50 IBUs, so it hits the mark in a nice spot. It gives you that good amount of bitterness without going too far over the top. SRM here is 10. So, I mean, we're going to have a little bit more color than you saw in the Kolsch, but, you know, it's still not overly dark. We do this one in 473 ml cans and 30-liter kegs as well. So this is generally regarded as the style that craft beer revolution really started along the west coast of the US and eventually got across North America and really the world. There's a lot more producers in Europe and other countries that are really burgeoning into IPAs, classic IPAs, Imperials, Hazies, you name it. The style has really taken off more so than what it was when it originated out in Europe with those like classic IPAs. You guys probably all know the story about IPAs, so I won't get into that. They were added into to the ships when they were crossing Europe as a preservative, and then were sort of a happy accident into the beers we know now. The story of this beer is pretty awesome as well, because we've actually named 2 of our beers after Doc Purdue. So he was a character in Blythe that resided in Blythe, and he loved his wild animals. He collected all kinds of things, crazy things, exotic animals. And he also liked to spar with this bear that he had. And this was part of the history books as well too. And we were actually able to find an amazing picture of Doc Purdue along with a few other guys, all in their boxing gear. And there's a picture of the bear over top of a couple of the guys with boxing gloves on. So the legend had it that he sparred with this bear, which is just absolutely insane to me. I don't want to get that close to a bear, let alone be boxing with one, but that was the story. And so we thought it would be great to add to our lineup in the whole vein of having very colorful stories for our beers. And also, you know, it is fitting for an IPA being punchy and sort of brash and out there. So yeah, it was a neat one for this one. Again, we use fresh Huron County well water that we pull from. We have a Pilsner malt in here. It's really the backbone of this beer. We use Carapils for some foam retention and some body. We have flaked oats. This also helps with the body and the substance of the beer. And a bit of caramel 60, which just gives it some of the honey flavors and again, a little bit of that sort of coppery gold color. The hops are really what are most important in this beer. We've got Citra hops, which is a wicked hop, very sought after, and once had quite a heavy shortage too, very difficult to get, but that gives it a lot of that grapefruit, lychee, lime, lemon, orange, get all those kind of citrusy flavors out of that. We use Eldorado, again, some more like pineapple, some mango, some citrus. We use a little bit of Mosaic, Denali, and Amarillo. So a lot of hops in this beer, all working together to give it that fresh, punchy flavor. We use a dry English ale yeast on this. Pretty classic here. The other interesting thing about this is we use some Belgian candy sugar, Belgian candied syrup in this beer, which is not typically done on a West Coast IPA. But we use this to give it a little bit of sweetness without being cloying. A lot of this all ferments outwards, but it is just something that gives it a little bit more body and a little bit of flavor. And again, a little something different than your classic American style West Coast IPA.
Gotta go back to a couple of questions on the chat line.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first one is, are you guys considering, or have you done an alt beer?
An alt beer?
An alt beer, yeah.
We haven't done one. Are we considering one? Not that I know of directly, but I mean, we've had a lot of things that have come across the table. You guys may be familiar with our Renegade series that we did, which was used to be a new beer every single month. We changed those time horizons now to, just whenever we can really fit one in. But we're always trying different beers. Whether an alt beer is going to make it into that series or not, or if it's just something that we end up producing as a one-off or seasonal, I don't know. But I wouldn't say we weren't thinking about one.
That's good. Graham wants to know, do you have a glassware style that you recommend?
Ooh, it depends on what you're drinking, really. I mean, I love this style, this tulip style glass. We produce these. We have these at the farm. I pretty much drink most of my beers out of this style glass. I did start off with a more traditional pint glass, more of that Nonic style pint glass, which I would have, you know, sort of a Pilsner or Kolsch or something lighter with. But I love the tulip style for most other beers. It always yields a pretty nice pour, gives you good head retention, focuses the aromatics a little bit as you're drinking. Anything that has a little bit of that tighter, like tulip style at the top really helps you take in a little bit more of the aromas, which helps you taste the beer better. So that would be my favorite beer, or my favorite glass for something like an IPA that we're drinking now.
I'm not going to try and read the question, but if you check the chat line, the last question, the one from Mike, you might.
Okay, let me just pull it up here. Sorry.
That's okay. I told you that you wouldn't have to worry about it, but this one I think.
Yeah. Okay, chat. Here we go. Maltose, etc. before candy syrup. Oh, okay.
I don't apologize. That's a great question.
Yeah, no, it's great. I don't know if we tried those other things. I would have to ask our brewmaster if those were added in beforehand. Chances are probably not. I think they wanted to go with that Belgian style candied syrup because we were looking at doing a Belgian style IPA, and we ended up doing one in our Renegade series that was very similar to this, but we use a Belgian yeast as well as some Belgian candied syrup. So yeah, I think no is the answer. We didn't try those things. We went right to the candied syrup.
Insightful question, Mike. Thank you. Keith's not here, but I do have to ask you, what's your favorite memory of Keith?
Yes. I don't know if I could highlight just one memory of Keith. My memories of Keith are always that he just radiates positivity. Such a genuinely nice guy. Always out there to give you a hug, which is great, and always welcome out there in the fields. You know, we see a lot of each other, and I see each other as in I see a lot of reps out there, and we're all very cordial with each other, and we all get along, and it's awesome. It's a great community out there. We're all out there trying to do the same thing, right? Which is you know, promote craft and get it out there and move the needle for that whole industry. So Keith's just great. No specific one I could recall, just that he always brings a lot of joy when you see him.
You play piano, you play drums. What's your favorite style of music?
Yeah. Pretty much anything but country. And sorry if that offends anybody. But
and you're out in country.
I know, but I'm actually not from Blythe, so I can say that. I grew up in London, and I live in Guelph now. But yeah, country music was never my thing so much. And it's funny because we've done a few concerts out at Cowbell inside, and a lot of them have been country music, which is great. And it's not that I won't listen to it. It's just really, it's not something I ever put on, but I listen to pretty much anything else. I'm a big fan of jam bands. I like long drawn out instrumentation, that kind of stuff. I love classic rock, love jazz. It just depends on the mood, where I'm at in the day. But yeah, country's the only thing I don't really go to, I would say.
It's a good thing Paul's not here tonight. Need to be a whole discussion about that.
Yeah, might get lit up for saying something like that. I figured, but that's the truth. It's the truth.
He loves country.
Fair enough.
A lot of things have happened over the last year for everybody, but for you specifically, how do you stay grounded through everything that's gone on for the last 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, it's trying to focus on just the day to day, not get too far ahead, not get too worried about anything. Really just look at the simple things, focus on the simple things, spend time with my kids. And a good beer helps too. Helps you stay grounded. Exercise is a really great outlet for me. Whether it's just walking to more strenuous physical exercise, those kind of outlets really help clear the brain and get your mind focused for the things that you do need to get done in a day. So yeah, I would say that's what kind of helps me through all of this.
What's the next beer we're going to?
Next beer, we're going to step it up a little bit and head into Double Exposure. Was everybody able to find this beer? Is good question. Yes, there you go. You got it. Good man. Oh, yes. Jen's got it too. Awesome. Okay, great. Well, for those of you that haven't been able to get it, hopefully you will be able to find it out there. This is our winter seasonal. So we just launched it at the beginning of December. And I was debating about either doing this one or doing our Hazy Days, which is a little bit more ubiquitous right now. We got that around in more places, but Double Exposure, for those of you that don't have it, looks like this. We had a little bit of fun with this can. You can see the reflection a little bit on it. We added some extra artwork to this to kind of mimic a Borealis-like effect, which was pretty cool. And we thought it would be a nice thing to do for the winter time. So this is our New England double dry hopped double IPA. This one's 7.7%. It's 55 IBUs. So definitely a bigger punch, definitely a step up from the Boxing Brewing. And if you guys have had Hazy Days, it is in effect the big brother, big sister of that beer. So Hazy Days comes in at about 6% and 30 IBUs. So this one is definitely quite a bit stronger. We wanted to do something in this vein, whether it was a double IPA or a double hazy IPA, for the winter time, because we wanted something that was going to be strong and hearty, and we hadn't really taken a good stab, at a double IPA before. So this was our first kind of foray into it. And so far it's done really well. We'll have this beer out in shelves through to probably February, March, and then it'll start to wean off as we introduce more seasonals and one-offs and all those kind of things as we get into the new year. Whether it'll come back after that, I'm not sure, but definitely a lot of fun to have in our lineup. I always enjoy a good double IPA. So this one you're going to get a little bit of Sultana and Hull Melon hops. These give it a lot of that bright citrusy flavor. Really, I get a lot of pineapple, I get a lot of lime, I get a lot of orange from this beer. It's very bright. And I love the haze factor as well too. This has been a huge style for the craft beer industry over the past little while. Lots of hazy pale ales, hazy IPAs, double hazy IPAs, double dry hopped IPAs. I mean, they're all over the place and they get scooped up. They're consistently the biggest sellers out there in the marketplace. So it's been great to have this one join the family as well too. Like I said, relatively new to us, but I think we did a great job with it. The brew team did a great job with it, and I look forward to seeing how the sales track on it over the next couple of months.
Katie and Jen have a couple questions to touch on, particularly with this. First of all, doing that double exposure on the can, does that increase the cost a lot?
No, it was, and it was frankly something that we just added at the last minute, because you have to, when you take your can in to get approved by the LCBO, they look at a variety of different things. but they do need to approve your artwork before it gets listed. And so we had it in, and then we wanted to make this 11th hour change because Craig Sinclair, who looks after this artwork, said, hey, I found this really cool technique we could add to the can. Do you think we could do it? And it was sort of a, oh, we've already submitted it. What do we do? And anyways, we were able to squeak it in. They got it approved, and it looks awesome. And I know it seems silly that you would think something like that would nullify your entry, but you just never know. It can be the funniest little things that can boot you out of there. So
You answered the second question. They wanted to know who did the artwork.
Oh, yes. So, I mean, Craig does a lot of it. We do have Melissa as well, too. She came up with a lot of this design as well, because you'll see, let me see if I've got the cans here. Got Hazy Days is very similar in layout. So this was a newer style that we started to do with our cans. And this was birthed by the team as well. So got to give a nod to everybody.
Yeah, that's always true. Yeah. Derek asked an interesting question. He wants to know how you guys decide what goes into the Renegade series and what's a standalone beer.
Right. Great question. So it's always good to watch the Renegades, because the Renegades are generally a test as to what will make it to something that will be more of a full production beer. So Renegades, we still like to try and do, I mean, we used to do them as only 50 hectoliter batches, but our tanks at Cowbell are 150 hectoliter tanks. So it's really advantageous if we can, in terms of a cost efficiency standpoint, if we can brew 150 hectoliter batches, but we have to have those sales already lined up for them. So when we were doing a Renegade every single month, it was a lot of beer to make sure that you're guaranteed to sell in really only a keg format. Now we're starting to can them, and now we have other outlets, and the prevalence of e-com and lots of other things are making it more possible. So it's always good to watch what we're doing on our Renegade side, because if those things become fan favorites or they go super fast, we know that that's something that really worked, that hit all the right buttons, and we will look at that as a inspiration for a next seasonal. And then what's happened with some of our brands in the past is we've taken those seasonals and we've seen their success just take off. So we make that application then with the LCBO to say, hey, we had this as a seasonal, it did incredibly well, can we now turn it into a full-time brand and then run it as a year-long brand? This is something that happened actually with Hazy Days. So Hazy Days was our spring seasonal, which we launched right at the beginning of COVID. It came out on beginning of March. So we had a couple of weeks of runway, and then COVID hit. We all got canceled out of the LCBO going in or doing any of our job really. But the success of that brand took off. And so we actually replaced it with another brand of ours that was a core brand. And we were able to tell them, look at the sales on this. It just only makes sense that we continue it onwards and not scrap it as a seasonal. So something like that could happen with double exposure as well too, right? It could be doing so well that we end up adding it into our core lineup and having a double IPA out there in the market all year round. If there's, if the sales are behind it, then that's what helps keeps it alive and keeps it staying. So,
what's been your biggest challenge through COVID?
Online school with the kids. If any of you guys are parents out there, little ones, it's yep, I see some hands. Good. Yeah, it's not all bad. It's just, when they're home as well with you and you're trying to work, it is a challenge, because you end up having to help them out. My kids are still pretty young, so they need that assistance with the technology and clarification on things. And so that sure has been a challenge throughout it. But yeah, that's more of like the personal side. As a brewery, I guess, the challenge was really the pivot at in March, right? I mean, like we had everything in cans and kegs and forecasting for, going into the springtime when you'd see patios opening up. And so we had a lot of beer in kegs, and that was a huge challenge to deal with that beer, get beer back from customers, deal with all those refunds and shipping and all that stuff. Like it was a mess for a period of time. And then pivoting the production side to increase all the packaging for cans so that we could feed retail, because retail was what took off, right? That's when we started to see LCBO, beer store, grocery store just go through the roof, because that was the only conduit for people to buy their beer. So that was a big challenge for our brewery. I think we did a great job with it, but that from a work-related impact of COVID in this year, that was probably our biggest one.
Well, that's a huge pivot.
Yes, yeah,
it was, and all having to happen in a very short period of time.
Yeah, big challenge. And craft breweries don't get precedence on can production either, right? Even if we order whatever our PO is for cans, it's a fraction of what Molson, Coors, Labatt's, whomever want to put in for can orders. So if they all of a sudden drop a PO for 100 times the order that we do, the canning company, of which there are only a couple, will take their order into consideration before ours. So it was lucky that we generally do quite large can orders, because they're core brands. We know we're going to stick with these cans for a while, so we were in a good state. But I do feel for many breweries, they probably would have had a very tough time, and we still came close a few times too with being able to have enough cans on hand to make it all work.
Yeah. Graham wonders if you guys could form a buying group for cans.
If we could what, sorry?
If the microbrews could join together and form a buying group for cans.
Yeah, I mean, like theoretically you could for the actual physical can, but it's all the branding that goes on top of them, right? So if you do wrapped cans, which some of our brands are wrapped cans, then that would be somewhat okay, but you still need to have them wrapped. Like that's part of what they do, right? Is they're producing everything and then shipping them out. So be difficult on that front. If you did all of that in your brewery, if you wrapped your own cans in your brewery, then that would make a buying group more effective.
What do you see that's new and exciting in the craft beer industry right now?
I mean, I love seeing more and more breweries opening up. I mean, this was a particularly challenging year, but prior to COVID, I mean, there was a ton of breweries in planning. And I love the idea of the all different phases of the industry, where you have new breweries opening up that want to service their local area. The mom and pop shop that's, has their little bottle shop and has people come in from the neighborhood and they're servicing their locale, to that mid-range brewery that's going to get into the LCBO, maybe do a little beer store, maybe do a bit of grocery, and service a tri-city area or multiple municipalities, to then the bigger, more ambitious breweries that want to take over into the province or go multi-provincial or national. I love it all, and I think there's room for more of all of that. And it's great to see people with business ideas fill in all of the gaps that they see and the opportunities that they see, and take over. So I think that's a really exciting time for the industry coming up. I see a lot of excitement in brand development too. I mean, I'm seeing no shortage of new styles popping up all the time. I think there's a lot of runway still left for IPAs. We talked earlier about how hazies have been very popular in all formats. I think there's going to be a resurgence to some degree in that, clean, classic American style, West Coast style IPA. I think people are going to want to go back to that a little bit more and revisit that style. So I would imagine that would be an exciting part of the industry coming up. I think sours are going to still have their heyday and will continue to shine. And then there'll be more innovation, more things that'll start to pop up that I think will be really cool to see because that's what the craft beer industry is all about. It's just innovation. Keep pumping out new stuff.
What's next for Cowbell?
What's next for Cowbell? We got a lot of exciting things going on out of the brewery. Things that have been a little bit stultified with COVID, but we're planning an amphitheater out at the brewery. We have, for those that don't know, we sit on 111 acres of farmland out in Cowbell. We have a massive facility there that's a brewery, restaurants, event space. But we have a lot of grounds that we intend on utilizing. We did plant 13,000 trees right out of the get-go that are on the back half of our property that we used as sort of a carbon sequestration program in a whole vision of being carbon neutral, of which we are on our grounds, but we will continue to do more to make sure that our whole company can be carbon neutral in effect. It's just a massive undertaking and has a long runway ahead of it, but we're constantly looking at ways and avenues to do that. So we plan on building this amphitheater out there, which will generate a ton of traffic to Cowbell, to the farm, and provide people with concert and event space that's outdoor, that we can service our beers. We can also hold festivals, food festivals, beer festivals, all kinds of other special events. So that'll be really neat. We're working on a food forest right now with University of Guelph, which is really cool. So they've got some neat plans for sort of this like multifaceted garden where we could grow fruits and vegetables, have an orchard. So more to come on that. That'll be a big project in the spring of 2021. We couldn't get underway this year, unfortunately, but there is some planning and allocation of resources and space for that. And then as we were talking about before we officially started, just where do you put people that want to come out there and visit and have a few drinks and really have a time? There's a lack of hospitality in terms of hotels. So that would be something that would be very welcomed. Not something that we were necessarily going to take on personally as a company, but we were looking at partnering up or at least having other people that have sound experience in that business to look at the possibility of setting up something like that out there. That would be a viable business endeavor for them. We could do camping on our grounds, which would be cool. It would be very welcome, but as we discussed earlier too, that's not what everybody wants. There's definitely people that are going to want a hotel room and a bed and a hot shower and all that stuff to be comfortable. So yeah, and I would imagine too, there's going to be some more brewery expansion. We've gone under a ton of expansion in 2019 and in 2020, added new tanks, which is fantastic and well needed, but we will need more again soon. We were also able to take over the emergency services training center, was adjacent to our property, relatively new building, but the municipality wasn't necessarily making enough money off it with that. So they decided to move it, and it gave us the opportunity to purchase that building, which we moved into in earnest this year, the latter half of this year, which has been fantastic. So that gave us a ton of extra storage space now. And we've had a lot of discussion of how better to utilize that building. We have some offices out there and, like I said, some storage space, but there's more to come out in that area as well. So yeah, lots going on. No shortage of things happening out of Cowbell.
That's great. Last beer.
Yes. So we have Raspberry Moon. Yes. It's people getting it. That's great. Okay, so Raspberry Moon is our fruit sour IPA. This guy is 6.2%. Whoa, nice and tart. I figured it would be a refreshing closer for our beers. So yeah, this beer is 6.3, we decided that we wanted to follow up our pomegranate honeysuckle fruit sour, which was our first sour that we ever did at Cowbell. So there's a lot of chatter about doing a sour in general, and it was something that our whole team was very excited about, but also very nervous about too, because when you introduce souring bacteria in a brew house, if it deviates from its intended place, it can just wreak havoc on your entire brew house. And we were very concerned about how to contain it and make sure that we could brew a world-class sour, but also not wreck the rest of our beers and go down in flames. So we ended up dedicating a tank specifically for sours. We keep hoses and dedicated parts only for that particular style of beer. So any sour that we do only stays in that one tank in that one area. We started out with a palm honeysuckle. It actually became our best seller over the period of time that it was out. So we quickly learned the penchant for sours out there, the demand for sours, and it led us, into this beer, which we decided to boost up a little bit from the palm honeysuckle. It was about 4%. And we decided that heading into the fall, winter time, which is when this beer launched, was basically at the end of August, that we'd elevate the ABV a little bit more, bring out a little bit more flavor set, and really fortify it for the fall winter months. And I think they did a wonderful job of it. I get that melon, raspberry, tart cherry flavors in it. It's very effervescent. You get that gripping bite from the lactobacillus that's in there. That was the souring agent that we decided to go with for this particular sour. Definitely a bacteria that we will continue to work with in future sours. And I'm pleased to say that we do have some awesome ones in the pipeline for 2021. So if you guys are all sour fans out there, you know anybody, then yeah, we'll have lots more coming out this year, which I'm very excited about, because I think it's a great style of beer. It was something that I wasn't particularly interested in until probably about a year ago, 2 years ago. I really started to really warm up to them. I'd had them over the past like several years, and I was always sort of ho-hum on them. Oh yeah, this one's good. I'm not sure about this one, but once I had some fruited sours and from some world-class breweries that are producing some amazing sours, I started to really enjoy what was out there. And I think Cowbell's done a wonderful job, both with a palm honeysuckle and with a raspberry sour IPA. That I'm very excited for what's coming next. And I think we got a lot of promise for our sour game.
I'm not always a sour fan, but I'm enjoying this one.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I find when it's sour just for the sake of being sour, I sort of equate it to something that's spicy just for the sake of being spicy. You know, it's got to have a flavor set to it. If there's something in there that brings something to the table, then that's what gets me interested. So if you have a flavorful spice in a dish, I'm all inclined to eat it. But if it's just going to make beads of sweat come out of my forehead, then I'm not so inclined. Whereas same thing with a beer, I want something that is going to give me flavor and be interesting, not just sour for the sake of being sour.
Yeah. Now I got to backtrack. I missed the question from Derek, and I'm sure you touched on it, but maybe didn't make it clear. He's curious as to what did you do with all the kegs that you got back at the beginning of COVID? Did they just get like dumped, or did you try and can them?
Right. So we couldn't can them. I wish we could have, but it wasn't possible. You just start picking up. The process is just incredible, but you would pick up too much DO, dissolved oxygen. It would make for a non-superior beer, and we just wouldn't be able to do that. So we took everything back. Any full kegs we took back, any partials, we tried to work with our customers with them on solutions for how to keep them floating so they weren't all burned. And once we had everything back, we looked at what can we do besides dumping them, because you pay a ton of tax on this beer and you pay a lot to produce it, to ship it, on the pretense that you're going to get money from the final customer. But when that all stopped, then you got to pay money to take it back, and then you got to pay money to dump it. So what could we do to eliminate some of that cost? So we looked at, we ended up teaming up with a distillery, and we donated a huge amount of volume to them to help them make sanitizer, which was fantastic. So they turned it into a bunch of sanitizer that we got at the brewery, that actually all of our sales reps got to for our vehicles, because we were still out driving around, so we could have ample sanitizer to deal with all of our needs there. And it turned out great. I mean, it still kind of smelt a bit beery, but it had its desired effect and its microbial effect too. So it was all good. So we were able to at least salvage some of that in a good way. But yeah, some of it had to get dumped too, just by nature. So that day we were dumping beer.
Just to follow up on that, did the same thing apply to beer that you had already canned or kegged that was still in house and you hadn't yet sent out to licensees? Were you able to divert that, or was it the same thing? Once it's in the keg, it's done.
Yeah, so it depended on the beer. So some beers have a longer shelf life than others. So depending on what it was that we had, we could actually keep it in keg, and we were able to start serving it again come June, because we had just freshly kegged it and it had a longer time horizon. But IPAs, no, those just don't last. I mean, really, we try and have those consumed within a 3-month period. And your first month you're at its best. By the second month, you're starting to see a little bit of deterioration. By the third month, generally you pick up on those deteriorations. We have a world-class canning line. Our DO pickup in our cans is like very, very minimal. We've got it down to an incredible rate now, which is good because that really extends the shelf life. So that translates into kegs too. We have a very low DO in our kegs, which gives them a long shelf life. But at the same token, science is science, and eventually, decay happens in those beers. So some of them we were able to salvage, but a lot of them, yes, had to go by way of sanitizer or eventually down the drain.
And I missed a question from Dave earlier. Cowbell's a fantastic brewery, but he wants to know if there's any hidden little microbrews in your repertoire that you would like to recommend. Hidden gem. Oh.
Yeah, like other Ontario microbreweries.
Yeah,
that I would recommend. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge Sawdust City fan. My wife's side of the family has a cottage up in just outside of Lake of Bays, actually, and I always make a point to stop there on my way in. I love Sam. I don't know if you guys have ever had him on the show or know him, but he's a beauty, and he puts out some excellent beers. Last year they did that new beer every single week, which was an incredibly ambitious project, but I got my hands on a whole bunch of them, and my hat's off to them for organizing and managing that and still making those beers top shelf. I thought virtually every single one that I was able to get was fantastic. So I give a nod to them. I think they're fantastic. We've been buying a lot of Third Moon stuff recently out of Milton. My wife's family's from Milton. Yeah, I got a thumbs up there. I see that. Yeah, they're doing great stuff. And again, to kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier about progression, like they had, I don't know if you guys have tried those slushy beers that they've been doing, but really cool. And again, it's just something that not everybody is doing. So I give my hats off to them for trying something new and working on that style and doing a great job with it. And I think from having their beers from an early day to where they are now, I've seen such a progression in quality. Like I think they continually elevate their game. And I love to see that in a brewery. Like it's like going to a restaurant for the first time and, you're kind of like, man, and the meal was okay. Well, if they just opened up, you got to give them a break, right? You got to give them that little bit of time to really hone in their craft. And I do the same with breweries. I like to revisit them all the time. Even if it's a brewery that I tried their beer and I'm like, whew, not for me, or they missed the boat here. I'll go back and try them again because I'm hopeful that they've learned something and they've progress, because we were the same way. We weren't perfect every single time. We've had some duds along the way too that we've had to clean up and correct, and being humble about that and being able to recognize it and correct it, I think is a great scene. So I really, I've been loving Third Moon. We love Half Hours on Earth too. Out of Seaforth, they're our neighbors in Blythe. Man, their sours are top shelf. You talk about sour game, and they're some of the best out there. I would make them world class on the sour front, frankly. And I've had a lot of sours. I've got quite a bit of Cascade on the bar behind me, and they're right up there with Cascade in terms of the flavor profiles and quality I think that they can get out of their sours. So give a nod to them too. But yeah, there's lots of craft breweries. I do drink a lot of other beers. I really do. I love to support local and support all the other guys out there.
What's next for Zach?
Yeah, it's trucking on, really. I mean, it's a crazy world out there right now. So there's a lot of, not sure what's going to happen next kind of feelings. So I try and just take it day by day. I'm very excited about what we've got in the tank and what we got coming up for Cowbell. So I look forward to growing with these guys and working on some new brands and working on some new horizons. But keeping it simple for the next little while, because I think that's kind of the wise move until we see a little bit more sunshine on the horizon.
I hear you. Zach, if you could travel back in time, because I'm going to get into the philosophical stuff now. If you could travel back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Don't sweat the little things. Keep it simple, and don't be afraid to go for something. Don't be afraid to take the leap, take the chance. Time goes by very quickly, so make the most of the present, I think is always a good reminder, and something that I would tell my previous self.
And if there was one thing you would like everybody to take away from our chat tonight, what would that be?
Drink a beer.
You would not be the first person to tell us that advice.
Yeah. I don't know. I hope everybody got something out of the chat tonight, and I hope everybody had their questions answered. And I'm definitely here. If we've missed any, I have not been paying attention to the group chat. So Bill, you can fill in where you need to, but I'm happy to help out and answer any questions that I might have missed or that I can answer.
If you missed any, it's be my fault. Jen had one that I'm just going to remind her that we had Steve from Innocente on, and he went through that whole process. You just triple distill beer, and then you distill it even more till you get to the alcohol content you need.
Oh, to make the sanitizer.
To make hand sanitizer, yeah.
Right.
Authorities.
He even talked about the fact that he had a high enough alcohol content in the air, probably could have blown the brewery up.
Yeah. Well, you have to watch those things too. It can get dangerous.
Well, very dangerous. Zach, I want to thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule early in the new year to talk to all of us about Cowbell and yourself. We totally appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's really nice to be here with you guys. And I hope it was informative and some fun.
Yeah. And I do want to remind everybody, Lager Dave on from Allura Brewing next week. And you'll be getting an email from me as soon as I have the details worked out with Aaron from Little Beast for the following week, because I am likely going to have to make a run down to Whitby to get the beers for everybody. So you will get an email later this week as soon as I know all the details. Again, Zach, thank you. I truly appreciate it. And looking forward to an opportunity to either share a beer behind you or join you with one at Cowbell when we can do that.
That would be fantastic, and you're welcome to both.